What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Truist Championship, and it's been a hot run for us lately. A lot of weeks of profit in the row, and while last week I didn't quite get into the top 5 of the GPPs, we still had ourselves a good Sunday sweat out there. Was well into the profit out there for our exposure, and Showdown is pretty solid over the weekend as well. So I'm liking the momentum that we've gathered over the last few weeks. It'd be nice to get back into the outright column like we had there with that JT outright, or potentially to try and get first in one of those GPPs. So this week with the Truist, we've got ourselves a signature event, Philadelphia Cricket Club, which will be a star of its own over there from the golf course perspective. And here in this DFS and betting preview, going to get you ready for all of the exposure to come. So from the first part, we're going to focus on the golf course and what to expect out there from conditions. We'll go through some key stats, also some comp courses that I'm using out there to identify my top pieces of exposure. And then afterwards is we're going to focus on what I'm actually playing this week. So over from the fantasy perspective, my DFS core plays and value plays, as well as some outright bets from the sportsbook perspective, and I'm going after early here on a Monday. And this golf course leaves a lot of unknowns because we've never seen it before, but go through a few ideas on how we're expecting it to play and how you can leverage that over there in your fantasy lineup. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in. But first off, a look at the golf course. A lot of touts this week are going to hit you guys with a bunch of ideas on how they expect this golf course to play, and oftentimes they're going to end up wrong in doing so. And it's not really their fault because it's really difficult to break these things down, but ahead of time, just know that anything you hear from a podcast, including myself this week, is only going to be our best judgment on the golf course. So, I've listened to a few podcasts already. I like to get a good sense for where the community is going, and I've heard a variety of different things about Philly Cricket Club. I've heard some say it's going to be a birdie fest. I've heard US Open type of conditions from others. I've heard people say it's all about bombing it off the tee, while personally, I think it's about the accuracy off the tee. So, and all of your touts are going to give you a different idea on what they think this week, and I think rather than focusing on what could happen at this golf course, is we should focus on the cold hard facts, what we know for sure is going to be in play this week, and how you can use that to your advantage. That's how I handle these kind of situations for the most part. Right? I'll have my ideas, my theories for how a golf course is going to play. I'll incorporate those, give it my little flavor out there with my player pool, but I also know that none of us have a crystal ball. None of us are Nostradamus, know exactly how it's going to play ahead of time, and I can remember so many examples out there in the past where the community got it dead wrong. So let's talk about the facts for this golf course. And by the way, for my full course breakdown, I do have a link in the description to go out there and check that out over there on the channel already, but this is going to be the Spark Notes version. It's a short par 70, so it's about 7,100 yards, and there are a bunch of holes that are under 440 yards. So that tells us right off the bat there that distance is not a massive factor. Both par 5s are sub 560 yards, so easily reachable for every single player in the field. And then you even have some par 3s that are like 110 yards. So you're going to have 4, maybe 5 approaches per round where it'd be a quote-unquote long iron in hand. The rest of the round, it's mid-irons, if not wedges, into a lot of these par 4s. So right off the bat, I can tell you that distance, driving at distance in general, having that power is not a massive weapon around here. Now, could it be useful to have 80 yards into a green as opposed to 100? For sure, but at courses like Quill Hollow, where you're changing it from like a 180 yard approach down to like 150, that's a much bigger difference than changing it from a 100-yard approach down to a 70-yard approach. And because it's a short par 70, I don't think that there's a massive advantage to having that kind of power. So the first fact this week that I think is counterintuitive to kind of some of the things I've heard this week already is that this is not a bomber's golf course on paper. Now, could it play differently? For sure. I want to throw that out there. It's going to be softer this week. There's a lot of rain that they're expecting in the area this week, but it's only 7,100 yards. So on paper, it is not one of those sort of golf courses. We also know that it's bent grass out there on the greens. That can be used to your advantage. It's that northeast bent grass that we know out there. That is a cold hard fact that you can lean into. Outside of that, there's not much that we know about this golf course. We know that there's going to be a lot of birdies out there because of the plethora of short approach shots. We also know that the par 5s are going to get torn apart. I mean, you're going to see probably a 10-15% eagle rate because of how short those par 5s are. And that's the extent of our knowledge this week. Any other tout out there that's telling you that they know exactly how this golf course is going to play is lying to your face. And And, I have seen some difficult green complexes, right? If you look at some of the overhead views, they look like they're really difficult to go out there and putt. But until we see PGA Tour pros out there on those surfaces, we don't know if they're going to be slippery or fast. We don't know if they're going to be firmer this week than what the PGA Tour is used to. And because of all the rain that they're getting in the forecast, I have a hard time thinking that they're going to play really firm and fast, like I've heard from some of the other podcasts out there. So, instead of really getting bogged down into the weeds, into all of that crap that I really think is hard to go out there and predict, let's focus on what we actually know is at hand. So with the shorter golf course, I'm focusing on shorter proximity buckets for my iron stats. 175 yards and in are where I'm putting extra emphasis. Putting, I'm looking at the bent grass stats. And if you want to look at some form heading in, I think that's okay as well. Off the tee, I'm looking at some form, but then driving accuracy, because I don't know if power is going to be a really big importance here or not. It could be for all I know, but based on what I'm looking at, I don't think it's going to be a big factor. Accuracy, though, with all the undulation on the greens, I could see being important to have the right angle into these greens. I'm looking at birdie or better percentage with the rain that they're getting. I'm looking at sand safe percentage because there's nearly 130 bunkers around this property. So I think you're going to see a lot more sand shots from these players. And then with comp courses, this is really de-emphasized. I'm not exactly sure if these are perfect comp courses, but similar agronomy at these courses, northeastern, midwestern golf courses with bent grass greens, usually ryegrass, fescue rough at all these different kind of tracks. And the RBC Canadian Open courses have a similar type of look to what you're going to get this week. A lot of shorter par fours with that ryegrass, that deep green rough that you have around those fairways. Memorial's a par 72 version of this event, in my opinion. It has the two extra par fives, but maybe a little bit harder than what you're going to have for this week. And then the Travelers too, which it's a little bit shorter than what you're going to have this week. In fact, it's only 6,800 yards over there. The shortest tour course that we play the entire year, but emphasizes the same kind of thing where it's bent grass putting at all these different kind of tracks, mostly iron shots from 175 yards and in, which is what we know they're going to have this week, right? You go hole by hole. I did that over there on the course breakdown. You can see exactly where most of your iron shots are coming from. Outside of 4, maybe 5 approaches the entire day, you're not going to have anything over that sort of a number. And that's for your shorter players. We're not talking about bombers only having shots from 175 yards and in. I'm talking the entire field. So, if you are a bomber, maybe you're going from something like 175 down to something closer to like 150 out there into greens. I'm not sure that that's a big enough difference out there per shot to warrant making this a quote-unquote bomber's paradise. It is wide off the tee. You do want to say that. I think that's why a lot of people are saying it might be a bomber's paradise. It's just that the holes don't have the length to make it worth it, right? Maybe on some of those longer par fours, the ones that are closer to 500 yards, only a couple out there on the golf course, it'd be nice to have that sort of length, but I'm not sure that dispersion, the accuracy you're giving up for that kind of power is worth it at a golf course this short. So that's the golf course take, a little bit more nuanced than what we normally go through there because it is a new week. But for the entire golf course take, make sure to check out my video for that over there on the channel already. And make sure to check out Bet the Number to go out there and create your own model for this week, because anytime you have a new golf course, maybe you have your own narrative out there for this kind of a week, run with it, right? Because no one really knows what to expect. I've already prefaced it with, I only have my theories on what to expect for this kind of event. If you have something that you think nobody else is running with, a narrative that if you end up nailing could get you onto some lower owned players, then run with it at a golf tournament like this. That'd be my advice to anyone out there watching this, is if you vehemently disagree, you vehemently have a take on how this golf course is going to play, is don't be afraid to be different on a week like this. Us touts out there, myself included, get things wrong all the time. And it's not completely unheard of to go out there, run against the grain, and to go out there and win a GPP. And just to give you guys an example, last week I heard some people mentioning an AM/PM wave advantage, multiple podcasts, multiple sites throwing it out there. And, on paper, if there was no delay last week, it looked like that was going to be a potential advantage. Then Mother Nature comes in and throws you a curveball. So, it's even more so the case when we have no data on a golf course, right? If everyone thinks that they have this thing down to a tee ahead of time and they know what's going to happen, then it's not a terrible idea sometimes to run against the grain and take your take that way. It helps for me this week that my take is just by default a little bit different than what other people are doing. I think it's more of a plotters, more second shot golf course than anything out there for this kind of golf tournament. But whatever your narrative is, maybe you're an around the green guy this week. I think that might be the one take that might actually be wrong around a golf course like this. But, whatever your category is that you're going to go out there and emphasize the most, get in the lane, make it yours, and leverage yourself against the field. Now that we know what to look for out there in our players, let's go through some of my top pieces of exposure that I'm using for in DFS in my outright betting. So first play is going to be Patrick Cantlay here at $9,500, who I bet at 19.25 to 1. So it's a 10% boost from 17.5 to 1, hence the awkward number over there from the outright perspective, but a player that fits this golf course to a T. He's got the bent grass putting that I'm looking for my players up top. I do think that if it is an easier golf course like I'm kind of leaning towards right now, that it could be a little bit of a putting contest when it's all said and done. And then especially when you look at the form heading into this event, he's playing some of the best golf that he has for quite some time. So whether it's the last 24 rounds, last 12 rounds that you look at, one of the best tee to green players in the field. And especially if you just narrow it down to the ball striking, so you're off the tee and your approach play, well into the positive in both categories. So over his last 24 round sample size, what we have here on the screen, you can see gaining close to a half a stroke per round there off the tee. And then with his approach play, 0.84 shots gained approach per round. So you can see there are a few other guys that are gaining across both categories, but in terms of consistency, you're not going to find that unless you're with a Colin Morikawa that's over a half a stroke in both categories, or your Rory McIlroys of the world who are in just torrent stretches when it comes to those top 5, top 10 finishes. So Patrick Cantlay playing some of the best golf of anyone up top. And if you go to the last 12 measured rounds, it holds up for Patrick Cantlay. You can see over that stretch even better when it comes to that shots gained ball striking, and the short game has surprisingly been what's holding him back. And what you can see on this bent grass surface, but he's even better on the surface than what you had over those last 24 rounds. So for his career, gaining about a third of a stroke per round on bent grass over that last 24 round sample size, right? A slight negative out there on the greens in general. So you'd expect him to be a little bit better this week than what you've seen over that kind of a sample size. And if you happen to get the good putting week from Cantlay, which back then, like 2-3 years ago, he used to do this like every other week. He had a spike putting performance out there. If you can get the putting to catch up to where the ball striking has gone over the last year or so, Cantlay could have a massive 2025. So I don't like the guy. He's one of my least favorite players when it comes to just pure fandom out here on the PGA Tour. But when I'm betting, I'm going out there and I'm handicapping an event, I have to throw that to the side. I can't have my bias, that homer with the Jordan Spieth play, for example, go out there and cloud my judgment. And while it'd be nice to go out there and say, oh, Jordan Spieth is going to win here at $9,200, the modeling favors somebody like Cantlay. And it's not to say that I might not play a Jordan Spieth this week. I might not even bet him for an outright out there on my exposure at some point. There's definitely a possibility that he goes out there and sneaks his way onto my card. But in terms of where my projections align and where I'd go out there and want to recommend plays out there to other people, Cantlay would be the first name that comes off of my tongue. So $9,500, I think in DFS he will get some ownership, but because this range has so many solid plays in it, I don't think he's going to be aggressive chalk or anything. So for example, you've got JT at 10 grand, who I think will get some play after he went out there and won the RBC Heritage. I think Russell Henley, who you can see is our next core play, is probably still going to get played himself. Jordan Spieth at this form, also Tommy Fleetwood grading out pretty well for a week like this, are going to take just enough attention away from guys like a Patrick Cantlay, where he'll be closer to like 15 to maybe 18% projected owned, which on a slate like this for a 9K range player isn't the worst ownership. It's about average, a little bit over the average ownership out there in a Patrick Cantlay, which if that's where he ends up coming in, is somebody that I'll get over the field on. So outright number one, core play number one of the week that I'm getting over the field on, and an example of the kind of exposure that I'm looking for up top. Course fits with the agronomy, good form, good course fit long-term around a Philly Cricket Club. A lot of the key stats that we were emphasizing before, you're going to see them towards the top end of those metrics. Next up, we got Russell Henley, who from the course fit perspective, this comes down to the driving aspect I was talking about before. I don't think you have to be a bomber to win around this sort of golf course. And if it is a second shot golf course where it's all about hitting your irons, Russell Henley is going to be live, because when you take him at like a Sony Open, you take him at the golf courses that don't have a whole bunch of 500-yard par fours, you usually see him in that top 10, top 20. And if he happens to have a good putting week, which can be his Achilles heel at times, he is very inconsistent when it comes to his shots gained putting stats. But when he finds a hot putter, gains 2 to maybe 5 strokes on the greens over any given event is when he borderline wins golf tournaments. And what you've had for Russell Henley lately is that's become a lot more regular for him. So over his last 24 measured rounds, you can see he's been into the positive across all 4 categories. That approach play, that tee to green play in general, is almost always going to be his calling card. And if you go to the last 12 measured rounds, it's been just as consistent. He's been into the positive across all 4 stat categories, most significantly into the positive over there on approach, which is just exactly what you would think that Russell Henley would be doing. So he's been on brand, under the radar, hasn't been that popular over there for DFS. And now that we're at a golf course that I think really suits his game, this could be the spot to buy low on him, because he's not going to be popular this week, because you can see over here he's number 13 in the recent form ranking. So it's solid, but there's guys around him that are a little bit better when it comes to that category. Most notably Jordan Spieth, mentioned Victor Hovland before as well, probably going to be popular. Justin Thomas coming in off the wind, where, you know, a Henley, if he's going to be average, maybe just slightly above the average ownership, kind of like a Patrick Cantlay, then I'm going to be well over the field on him, because this is a spot where I could see him winning this golf tournament. Not only do I think he's a decent play over there in DFS, because he'll be average to maybe slightly above average ownership, but at 30 to 1, I think he has upside to win. If you take a look at the kind of shots gained metrics, the kind of events where Russell Henley is won at, you know, it's kind of like the API, where it's about the ball striking first. You don't have to be a massive spike putter to go out there and get the job done. And if you can go out there and have a good putting week, and normally, and for him, if you take a look at the golf courses where he's putted well at, it's been golf courses with difficult and fast greens. A lot of them have been Bermuda grass or overseeded Bermuda grass, like you had down there at the API. Bent grass, not his best surface historically, but that's not to say that he can't go out there and have himself a decent week this week. Right? Him going out there and gaining 3 strokes into the positive could be enough to win in a limited field event like this. So $9,400, I think you more so like him from the DFS perspective, but for an outright bet, I know I have to get a little bit grimy for the new golf course. I think you're going to see a lot of people bend the Obears, the Xanders, the Morikawas, heck, even the Roys up there at $12,000 to go out there and win. But at a new golf course like this that nobody has seen before, there's no experience factor around a Philadelphia Cricket Club. Give me some of the grimy guys. Give me a little bit of a more of a long shot card out there from the outright perspective, and that's where I'm going to be going with a lot of my exposure. Before we talk about our last core play, along with our 3 value plays and outrights towards the bottom end of the board, some longer numbers that I'm adding to the mix, do want to remind you guys where you can find these spreadsheets for yourself. That, of course, would be over there on my Patreon page, which you can find a link to in the description of this video. But on there, I've got all my projections, all my modeling, my entire player pool for every single event out there for every event on tour. And that's not just for main slate every single week. I also do showdown sheets out there for rounds 2 through 4 to give you guys projections, ownership, and my player pool for any given slate, not only for your research, but also to give you guys a pro's perspective and how they're playing in any given slate. And I am a 150 max player, so I probably enter a lot more lineups than a lot of you are playing. Some of you, maybe 150 maxes yourself, and getting that kind of perspective would be especially useful for any of you out there in that boat. But even if you're not, it shows you the kind of player pool that I'm going with, the kind of stats that I'm going out there and weighing the most. Right on top of just this sheet, this, you know, tab that we have over here, you've got the key stats, which are completely uncensored. You've got event history, recent form that you can look at for the entire field, shots gained metrics, which we've been referencing throughout this entire video, that are completely unblacked out over there for my Patreon members. So to join that, to get this sheet and completely uncensored, make sure to check out the description of the video for that. But our last core play here is going to be Keegan Bradley at $8,100, who he won at the Travelers a few years back, so the hometown Northeastern guy maybe has that sort of narrative going for him, but, you know, I'm not a big narrative guy, so I'll throw that over there to the side. I just like how Keegan Bradley's been playing lately, and if you go to the last 24 rounds, the last 12 measured rounds, no matter what sample size we go out there and use, he's been lights out from tee to green, and especially in the 2 ball striking categories, last 24 rounds, gaining close to 1/3 of a stroke per round there off the tee, 0.8 strokes per round over there with the iron play. And if we zoom into the last 12 rounds, so make it a little bit more recent, the off the tee play goes a little bit down, still about 0.2 strokes per round though, out there into the positive, and the approach play still over a half a stroke gained per round. So has been playing solid golf for the last 6 months at this point. That's why he's got a lot of momentum. A lot of people saying that he should be on the Ryder Cup team on Bethpage. I'm personally on that train, by the way. I do think he 100% should be on that team, even as a player captain. But this sort of golf course, when you're getting him on these bent grass greens, could be exactly what he needs on the putting surface. Because if you go to the last 24 measured rounds, there's been one real big issue out there for Keegan Bradley, because with these kind of tee to green stats, you would think that he'd have a win at this point more than just the BMW Championship. You think that he'd have a top 5, top 10 galore, but these kind of tee to green stats, he's losing close to 0.7 strokes per round with the putter. But on bent grass, it has been by far his best surface out there on tour. He is into the positive out there on bent grass. And if you compare it to any of the other surfaces out there on tour, Bermuda grass, POA, overseed, whatever the case may be out there on the PGA Tour, Keegan Bradley's into the negative in all of them except for bent grass. And if you compare this baseline to that last 24 rounds, he's nearly 3/4 of a stroke better per round on this bent grass surface than any other surface that you have out there. In fact, he's closer to a stroke per round better on this surface than any of the other surfaces that you have out there on tour. So, at $8,100, I think you're finding a golf course and a player that kind of match up perfectly, really good putting stats for the golf course that we have here. And if he continues to hit the ball as well as he has from tee to green, could get himself into contention. Now, kind of like a Russell Henley, he's an outright bet that I took because it's a grimy week. I want to take some long shots at a newer golf course that people are going to have a harder time going out there and handicapping. But for DFS, he's going to have lower ownership than a lot of the other guys around him. Like, I could see guys like Sungjae, Matt McNeely getting a little bit more attention this week, and Andrew Novak. I've heard Wyndham Clark thrown about, by a few people around the industry. Guys like a Keegan Bradley here could be average to below average ownership, and I think that he's a fantastic course fit for what you have here this week. So agronomy lining up a decent outright number over there at 40-1. I believe he's 45-1 on some books, maybe even 50-1 this morning you're able to go out there and get. So if you can go out there and find a better number, by all means, go out there and do so. Unfortunately, I'm limited to Hard Rock Bet down here in South Florida, so I'm only going to have so much that I can do when it comes to line shopping, and I'm going to bet guys that I think can actually win this sort of week. And with that course fit, with a lot of those advanced analytics being very favorable out there for Keegan Bradley, he's somebody I wanted to talk up on this video. And now that we've gone through our 3 core plays, let's move on to our value plays down low, which are a little bit cheaper, a little bit further down the board, so longer outright odds, and it's going to help you save some salary in your lineups. Now, $8,000 Robert McIntyre are not going to help you save a whole bunch, but next 2 players going to help you out a little bit more when it comes to the wallet. But let's talk about Robbie Mack, because there's a reason why he made this video. Modeling, not the reason for that. He's number 51 out of 72 in the field when it comes to total model ranking. A lot of that because the recent form has been dreadful out there for Robbie Mack. Number 71 out of 72 players in the field. You're only going to find one player that is worse than him out there in that category. But what you're getting with Robbie Mack is somebody that won at the RBC Canadian Open last year. If you remember, one of those comp courses that we were using was all the RBC Canadian Open courses. And he's accurate off the tee. He's got that positioning aspect to him. He's better on bent grass at putting than any of the other surfaces that he has out there on tour. You can see actually about 0.4 strokes better per round on bent grass than any of the other surfaces. Maybe not the 0.75 strokes that you had over there with Keegan, but still close to a half a stroke better per round on this surface over an entire event. That's almost 2 full strokes that Robert McIntyre is getting just based on being on this grass alone. And, I know the form isn't great. That's why he's going to be low owned out there in DFS this week, but must we forget that just a few weeks ago at major championships, he was the chalk at the 8K range. Everyone was wanting to play him because he was the hot guy in the market. Everyone thought he was going to go out there and have a lot of success, and he had some success going, but players have bad weeks, right? They have down stretches where for 2 to 3 weeks, they go out there and don't have their fastball. That's what's happened to Robert McIntyre. And oftentimes these players bounce back, and they bounce back in a big way when they go out there and get it figured out. And I would say that this golf course is perfect for Robert McIntyre. What you've seen is that from 150 yards and in are where he's the best when it comes to his iron play. He's not like he's a terrible long iron player, but from 150 yards and in, he's in the top 25 of most of those proximity buckets, as opposed to closer to average the further that he gets from the hole. And the bent grass stats, the putting stats, I think are favorable at a week like this. In a DFS, you're going to get slightly lower ownership here. So compared to some of the other guys here, I think that he'll be closer to the single digit ownership range as compared to like 12 to maybe 15% ownership on some of the other guys around him. So if you want some leverage in DFS, it's going to give you that aspect out there in your lineups. And at 50-1, I mean, I've seen crazier things happen before. And I think FanDuel had him at 60-1. So if you can get that, absolutely go out there and take advantage of it if you can. But there were some books that even had him at 40 or 45-1 already. So, some sports books seems to be giving a little bit more respect out there to Bobby Mack, and some of the other sports books around the industry are giving him credit for. And I tend to agree with the sports books that are giving him that kind of respect. So for DFS, he's going to be one of my low-owned, hopefully nutted plays that we have in this portion of the board, but I even think has potential to go out there and win this week. Next up, our next value play is going to be Justin Rose at $7,600, and this was the first outright that I placed this week. And for a lot of people, sometimes it's their stud up top, like maybe a Patrick Cantlay this week, that they go out there and hit for their first outright. But for me, it just makes too much sense for Justin Rose to win here. It's in my opinion, a more positional golf course off the tee. Jury's still out on that one. We'll have to see how that all bears out. But he's an amazing bent grass putter. In fact, one of the best bent grass putters that we have in the entire world. And the shots gained approach stats lately have been borderline insane for Justin Rose. Gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke per round, has been decent off the tee, has been driving it a whole lot better than what we've seen for the last few years. By far the best driving stretch that he's had for the last few seasons. And the putting stats are just coming to the top right now, right? He's been making everything, especially over the last few starts. And I'll remind you, at the Masters, where he got into that playoff against Rory, what kind of greens were we on? Oh, that's right, bent grass greens, just like what we're going to have this week. So not only is the ball striking falling into place, it hasn't even just been the last 12 rounds, by the way. Last 24 rounds are still really solid out there for Justin Rose, gaining in every category but around the green, and we know he has a stellar short game, so you're not going to worry about that one all that much. And now we're getting him on the surface where he's the best out of any surface out here on tour. We're getting him at $7,600, cheaper than most out there. The one thing I worry about for DFS is that I think he's going to be a little bit popular because I can't be the only one that sees the course fit here, sees the form out there in a Justin Rose and wants to go out there and throw him into lineups. But if I want to bet him at 66-1 to go out there and win, which by the way was a 10% boost out there from 60-1, then I'm for sure going to go out there and use him in my lineup. So I think it's a model ranking play where he's number 16, despite being number 28 down there in the pricing. Agronomy fits really well. Even the long-term stuff, right? He's a top 15 play down here at like number 30 in the pricing. I just hope that he's not that chalky. Like I could see him being close to 12, maybe 15% ownership. If he's getting close to that 20% range, then maybe that's the kind of point where I take him out of my DFS lineups and just let him be an outright bet that I go with. But as of right now, if he's going to be into that low teens in the ownership, then by no means is going to be somebody that I'm fading in my lineups. And then the last thing that we go through here, the last play this week is going to be Matt Fitzpatrick at $6,800, who kind of like a Cantlay, kind of like a Russell Henley, not my favorite players, but this feels like a good week out here for some of these losers. And Matt Fitzpatrick, I'm playing at 100-1 to go out there and win, and I think at DFS, this could be a mega low-owned play to go out there and get on. And partially, it's the putting on bent grass. You can see over here, gaining over half a stroke per round on the bent grass surface. That is nearly 0.8 strokes better per round than what you've seen over that last 24 rounds. But what I really like about Matty Fitz is that he's starting to come into form. And for like 6 months, he had been lost. He had just been hemorrhaging strokes over there with the ball striking stats. Over the last 24 rounds, he's actually positive off the tee, which for the longest time, he had been losing like half a stroke per round in that category. The approach play is still coming around. That's why he hasn't gone out there and posted a lot of top 10, top 20 finishes. But if you take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, that trend of getting better has continued. You can see even more into the positive off the tee, well into the positive around the green again, and the approach play still leaves a little bit of room to be improved, but the putter has been the real issue over the last event or so, right? It's not been the tee to green play. Tee to green play over the last few starts has been about a third of a stroke into the positive. The putter about a stroke into the negative is something that you'd expect to turn around this week. I mean, he's one of the best putters that we have out there in the PGA Tour. There have been seasons where he's top 5, top 10 out there in the shots gained putting, and you can see on this bent grass surface, it has been his best surface historically, kind of like a Justin Rose gaining close to that 0.6 strokes per round. And compared to that recent sample size, he's 1.5 strokes better per round on that type of grass than what you've seen for him lately. So over an entire event. Now, the 1.5 strokes is obviously an extreme example, but that is 6 strokes over an entire event. Or if the agronomy is going to be worth 6 strokes out there to Matty Fitz, realistically, it's not going to be worth that many, right? It's just, an extreme example because of how poorly he's been putting lately. But even if it's only like 2-3 strokes that are better out there for Matty Fitz, he gives us a good week with the irons and pop, right? That's a top 5, top 10 finish there, which for DFS is exactly what you're hoping for at $6,800. And I've got to say, I've seen crazier things happen than Matty Fitz winning on the PGA Tour. Like he won at RBC Heritage, he's won a US Open before, which by the way, the US Open was in the Northeast on this northeastern bent grass like what we have this week. And the country club has a very similar look to what you have at this golf course. Like when I was going hole by hole, I was thinking about Brookline and how similar it was to when Matty Fitz went out there and won. So that's partially the reason why I'm going out there and betting him here. But the agronomy numbers, him just looking a little bit better over the last few starts. And I know 100 to 1 is the pipe dream to win, right? I'm not expecting to go out there and hit an outright every single week. Like, by no means. I'm not delusional out there with my outright betting card. But in DFS, these are the kind of high upside course fits that I'm looking to go over there and get over the field on. So, even if he doesn't win, I'm hoping to scratch out like a top 10, a top 15 out of Matty Fitzpatrick. Might even still bet him for the top 10, top 20 markets out there for this kind of event. But the kind of play, the kind of course fit that you might want to ponder out there for some of your exposure. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the betting and DFS preview this week. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. And as long as they are at least 30 to 1 to go out there and win, you will win a free month access to everything I have to offer over there, which of course includes all the spreadsheets that you see throughout my content, all the outright bets that I end up getting to, also the underdog and prize pick stuff that I'm entering out there for round number 1. Go ahead, give me that guess down below, or just check out the link in the description of the video to go out there and join yourself. But that's all I've got out there for the preview this week. Best of luck out there with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. But it's over there in GPPs. I hope to see you guys towards the top of some of those leaderboards. It was fun competing against some of you last week that I saw towards the top as well. Hopefully we can make it another fun Sunday sweat here this time around. And best of luck with all of your outright bets as well. But it's a signature event. It's a big boy event. It's a really visually stunning golf course. So let's have ourselves a week. It should be a fun one. We got the PGA Championship coming up in a few weeks as well. Subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come throughout the year, which will of course include our Wednesday live stream. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time over there on the Ship It Nation YouTube. Over there is where we'll be doing the DFS preview, and then afterwards at 8 p.m. Eastern time is where we'll be doing the round 1 prop preview over here on my YouTube channel. So subscribe to this channel so you guys don't miss the prop preview there at 8. Subscribe to the Ship It Nation YouTube channel so you guys don't miss the preview there at 7 p.m. over there on Wednesday. That's all I've got. Appreciate the support that you guys give me over here on the channel, and see you guys out here throughout the rest of the week.